So, for anyone who's new here, anyone who doesn't know, what I do is this is some published academic philosophy. This is in looks like a book, Social Robots with AI, Prospects, Risks, and Responsible Methods. It's called Responsibility Plus Gap Equals Problem by Marc Champagne, and we read and we review it. And so if you stick around to the end, we have a review scheme and you get to review. So yeah, it all costs money. Says I will pretend to pay attention while getting my ass handed to me in Apex. Thank you, I appreciate that. So yeah. So as always, let me know. It's my first time reading it. I am not endorsing this. I am just reading it and evaluating it. We've read many bad things before and said they were bad. So it's like, don't hate on me if it was bad philosophy. You can hate on me a little if you want, but like seriously. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I'm sorry. I still have like phlegm in the back of my throat. It makes me cough. Introduction. We have not yet built or dealt with robots capable of making their own decisions. But if and when such robots arrive, our usual moral practices will come up short. This is in part because robotic autonomy means giving up human control. An autonomous robot may act badly, not because of any malfunction or malicious programming, but simply because it decides to. Until now, only mature adults were credited with this ability, so we always knew who to hold responsible, at least in principle. Yet, given that a programmer has no say in a robot's decisions and robots feel no pain, our desire to blame lacks a suitable target. Matthias called this the responsibility gap. And immediately right here, maybe this is the problem. Maybe we need robots that feel pain. Maybe if the robot felt, then it would need to, that would be the basis of morality, that it would have to feel bad. And maybe then it could be moral. Who knows? Sparrow argued that this responsibility gap is serious enough to justify a ban on the creation and deployment of autonomous robots. Yeah, I mean, so if it can make decisions on its own and it decides to do bad and doesn't feel bad about it, that's basically a psychopath. Arkin countered that such robots could be more moral than us. What does that even mean? More moral than us? Like, if there's some external system, maybe a robot could follow the system more closely than we could, but that system would have to be given down from, like, God. We would have to have, like, the absolute rules of morality given to us that the robot could follow it. Otherwise, we wouldn't know if it was following the rules correctly, or we wouldn't even know what rules it was following. Nibiru says, yeah, more human than human. But that's the question. Like, if it's smarter than us or better at following the rules, how would we know it was following the rules correctly? We couldn't verify it because it would be doing it better than we could. So we wouldn't know. So it's like, how would we even understand such things? Viper says, I imagine they mean they aren't swayed by personal biases. That's fair, but then there's also a question of do we actually have a coherent, consistent, moral system that we all think is like correct, and the answer is no there. And so what does it even mean to follow something if it's an inconsistent system? Like a computer given an inconsistent inputs will give you inconsistent outputs. That's just garbage in, garbage out. Like, well, what do we do? Nimiro says they would have their own bias at that point. It would just be different instead of better. And that's fair too. Maybe we just call it, why would we think their biases, because they're robotic, are better than our biases? There's no inherent good. If we're saying both of us can think, there's no inherent good to being made out of wetware versus being made out of silicon. Why would there be? What does silicon have inherently as compared to anything else? It's just a, chemical, not a chemical, it's a element. Okay. Champagne and Tompkins hold that a human can voluntarily accept blame in advance for a robot's acts. Keener contends that a human can also do this after the fact. Burry dismisses suggestions that robots could reach autonomy. Gunkel invites us to regard robots as moral patients. Gagosian invites us to regard robots as moral agents. Salvik says that autonomous robots cannot feel but may still be blamed. Teagard argues that the problem of prompting these various responses does not even exist. These debates are not settled. Lobis, thank you for the raid. I appreciate that. How is stream? How are you? And as always, if you need to raid and run, feel free to go, leave. But thank you for the thanks for the follow, trans woman. Yeah, thanks for the raid, Globus. How you been? What were you talking about today? Give Globus a shout out. Globus. Yeah. Hi. Welcome in everyone from Globus Stream. I am Noah. You can call me Noah. You can call me Noger, No Gray, No Grayo, or any other whatever you want to call me, as long as you're not a jerk about it. I'm a philosopher. I write on the areas of philosophical logic, metaphysics, theory of knowledge, and related topics sometimes. And yeah, I'm probably one of the, like, I only care about arguments. I care about arguments more than I should. And so it's like you, if you want to argue with me, you better be bringing the arguments. Like, if you have evidence, that's nice, but I care about the arguments. So like, we talk philosophy here, we read and review philosophy papers. And at the moment, we were actually talking about robot ethics. Like, that's what we're talking about today. So like, the responsibility of like robots and what we can do for them. So yeah. Viper says it would be interesting to see how an AI responds to the scenarios presented on the Absurd Trolley Problems website. Yeah, it wouldn't be that bad. The Paris AI conference and the Elon Altman beef. Yeah, UFOs are real, of course. There's a lot of things we don't, unidentified flying objects. They're definitely real. Robot ethics, we've got your attention. Yeah, we actually discuss a lot of this stuff because, you know, it's been in the news, so people are interested. But yeah, like, we are literally talking about robots as moral patients right now. How are we supposed to deal with robots? Are they things we should, like, take care of, like a pet, like something we have to treat with moral respect, or is it a moral agent, something that can make moral decisions? So we're talking. So yeah. Yeah. Viper says 1, serve the public trust. 2, protect the innocent. 3, uphold the law. 4 is classified. Yeah, no arresting of officers of the company, as always. Thank you for the I love fucking RoboCop. I love that movie. RoboCop's great. Thank you for the lurk. Good luck. Stay safe. Don't get caught. Yeah. And so you can see even they tried to get around that in RoboCop by having like a human inside it, so it still had some agency. And then the agency fought against the robot parts. Yeah. Hey Bowser, how you been? So yeah, as I said, Globus, if you need to raid and run, please do. Go like do self-care, whatever you need. If you stick around, awesome. Yeah, but let me yeah. What? The Elon Altman beef is funny. I mean, it's like these rich people getting into arguments with each other, and it's just like I don't find, like, I find it just sort of ludicrous. So like, yeah. They're all clowns. Like, it's just a lot of, and I feel bad saying that. I respect clowns, but like these like people in charge, they just act like such fools sometimes. So it's not great. Oh yeah, it's Stretch. No one's redeemed Stretch in a while. Oh, that's good. Oh, thank you, Bowser. But I don't know if there was anything of substance. I just saw Altman saying that he feels bad for Elon because he thinks he's a unhappy person, which is funny. Exactly, Nibiru. Clowns are talented. It takes a lot of work to be a good clown. They, like, you know, they make people happy and laugh. And I'm not particularly happy with either of those two at the moment. So we'll see. Okay, but here's what we were reading. We were reading this paper called Responsibility Plus Gap Equals Problem by Marc Champagne, and it's on robot ethics. Okay. So as always, feel free to ask me questions about what's going on. Let me know. This is my first time reading it. This is how we do. This is roulette. We don't know what we get here, what I'm going to land on. Okay. These debates, the robot morality responsibility, are not settled, so more stances continue to be built. Recently, Peter Koenig's ventured onto new terrain by maintaining that the responsibility gap exists but is not problematic. Call this Koenig's compromise. By all accounts, it represents a novel position. Like any stance, is it tenable? Doge says the way Peter Koenig's paper is in that link. Okay, thank you, Dojo. Appreciate it. Koenig grants that in some cases autonomous robots generate responsibility gaps, since we must credit them with bad actions, yet can never blame them. Viper says there was an interview with Elon. His kid was grabbing the mic saying stuff like, at SpaceX, we do whatever we want and they'll never know. Yeah. You know, I don't have any problem with like a little kid believing any sort of stuff. I have no idea what actually goes on at SpaceX. It just doesn't look very good when, like, you know, a kid with no guile just starts saying like terrible stuff because he heard it somewhere. But the truth, of course, is always more complicated. Like I heard he was like picking his nose and rubbing it on the president's desk. It's called the Resolute desk, which I find typical for this presidency. Okay, so yeah, can we credit a robot with a bad action but not blame them for it? He summarizes this standard understanding well. Quote, the idea is that it is the system's autonomy that cancels people's responsibility. At the same time, the machines are not deemed sophisticated or agent-like enough to be themselves possible bearers of responsibility, end quote. So, autonomous robots decide like human adults, yet do not feel like human adults, so the negative consequences of their decisions cannot boomerang back to negatively affect them. You know what's interesting about this? This is like, it feels very much like the contemporary black box AI stuff where it says, oh, it's not our fault, it was the computer that did it. It feels like they're pushing the responsibility, the engineers are pushing the responsibility away from them. It feels like a self-defense move here. Doty says, a kid with no guile goes well with my Shel Silverstein reading. Why, thank you. Yes, exactly. It does. Okay. But yeah, so I always worry that people are trying to dodge their responsibility. It's like, I made an unsafe car, but like you happened to be driving at the time. Well, the brakes gave out because I made it badly, not because you were driving. It's like, we took your word for it. Maybe that was fool us and we shouldn't have taken your word for it. But still, you're trying to pass off the responsibility onto someone else when it was your bad engineering in the first place. Okay. People have to know, you have to inform people of the risks involved. If you do not properly inform people of the risks involved, that's on the engineer. So it's like we're on like the creator or whatever. All right. Most people regard this worst of both worlds combination as worth avoiding. However, Koenig's claim that we can recognize the presence of responsibility gaps while feeling no pressure to seal or bridge them. As he puts it, if and when responsibility gaps do occur, we need not be too concerned about them. So where Sparrow took responsibility gaps to speak against the construction of potentially lethal autonomous robots, Koenig seeks to present a more optimistic view on artificial intelligence by dispelling such concerns about responsibility gaps. Yeah, I'm on the you have to know what you're getting yourself into side. Viper says, I quoted it last time, but it's worth quoting again, quote, a computer can never be held accountable, therefore a computer must never make management decisions, end quote. The IBM training guide, the training slide from 1979. Yeah. Like, where does the buck stop? Where does the buck stop? And if you understand that the computers are going to make shitty decisions, no one gets informed of that. Like, when we deal with this stuff. Like, you have to know that the LLMs hallucinate, that they don't get everything right, that you can't just ask them and it's going to be true. And it's like, if you don't know that, that's on the user because people should know that at this point. Nero says, it wasn't me. It was this conveniently made Rube Goldberg machine that I just so happened to be also have made. Yeah, exactly. But that's why it feels like people are trying to absolve themselves from responsibility. Viper says also Musk has won $23,000 in damages after suing a Chinese woman for defamation after she claimed the brakes on her father's Tesla Model 3 failed, which they did. See, that's the other problem with this country. You can sue anybody for anything, and I wonder how he won that when, like, there was damage after the brakes failed. So, but like, yeah, that's a different problem. I don't know how that happens. All right. Author says, so Champagne says, although I have no beef with techno-optimism, I will argue that Koenig's compromise is untenable. While all participants to the debates value options and would celebrate the addition of a new possibility, the feasibility of a stance depends on the concepts and commitments it combines, since these constrain what can and cannot be truthfully said or inferred. I submit that on a proper understanding of what responsibility is and what gap metaphorically means, their joint endorsement must repel an attitude of indifference. Oh, it was in China. Okay. Yeah, so they've got different legal standards over there. And so, like, it doesn't seem like that would work here in the United States. But, yeah, again, different rules, different laws. I have no idea. So, yeah. Dojo says, I do like the parenthetical, potentially lethal. The piano has been drinking, not me, Tom Waits. Yeah. You see, but that's a great quote, because you can see people have been trying to push off responsibility onto their tools forever. Like, it wasn't me, it was the gun that shot someone. Well, who pulled the trigger? But like you're saying, oh, it was the gun that did it. It wasn't you. Well, how's that work? But this is a common enough thing. And they're trying to say, look, it wasn't me, it was the machine. But then, like, they're saying, well, the machine doesn't also know what it's doing, and so you can't blame it, you just have to let it be. And so this author is arguing against this. Frank says, it wasn't me, it was this child I raised and trained. Yep, parents don't want that. Yeah, Pog Tom waits. And then there's also the Shaggy, it wasn't me. Even though you saw me on the floor, even you saw us in the shower, it wasn't me. Argument. Koenig presents two challenges to those who regard responsibility gaps as unproblematic. The first challenge is to explain why robotic autonomy creates gaps in moral responsibility. The second challenge is to explain why the existence of such gaps is problematic. Most would say that Matthias has already amply met the first challenge. So there's a different paper, a reference. Tom Waits wrote that song in 1976. Okay, so there were computers around in 1976, but the idea that you could blame a piano or a musical instrument, that highlights, that, emphasizes the issue. Matthias' many concrete examples failed to live up to his expectations. Koenig's basis for challenging a settled matter is, in my view, rather unclear. I will thus focus on Koenig's second challenge. This must be feasible because Koenig also skips his first challenge when he grants that such gaps may indeed arise. Okay, so we're just going to assume that we don't blame robots for moral failings because they're just robots. Or I guess we're going to leave that aside at the moment. Koenig's compromise involves a decision to not categorically deny the existence of responsibility gaps. A distinction can indeed be made between existing and being problematic. It is fully possible, for example, for a hurricane to occur at sea in a way that is not morally or practically problematic for anyone. Yeah, so stuff can happen on a different, let's say on like Mars. There can be a hurricane on Mars. If it was here, it would be a problem. It would be a problem if our people were on Mars, but it's not a problem that there is a hurricane on Mars in any sense for the rest of us. Yet, what happens when the analysis switches from hurricane to, say, calamity? Can a calamity exist yet fail to be problematic? The analytic-synthetic distinction may be blurry, but most would agree that a calamity involves loss and suffering by one or more people. Hence, if some particular event X in the world satisfies the description, blank is a calamity, so there is something that is a calamity. That's what this little symbolic thing is right here, which is very funny that they're putting this in this paper. That doesn't seem to have anything to do with logic. Then avoiding this true existential claim guarantees that the same X is best described as worth avoiding. So if it's a calamity, then it is worth avoiding. And I'd like to point out that this is bad logic. The use of X here, the parentheses, is wrong for anyone who cares. It should be here. This should be, So the parentheses should be on the inside of the existential, and then this should not be here. It should be only one X, not two existentials. So, yeah. Damn it, person. Come on, editors, you should know better. But yeah, a similar analytic entailment applies, I contend, to the responsibility gap. Responsibility gaps are by their nature undesirable. Just as calamities that happen but don't bother anyone makes no sense, the idea of responsibility gaps that exist but leave citizens and ethicists unmoved makes no sense. Yeah, I know, Nibiru Truths, they were trying to be clever, but clever for clever's sake is bad. Do not try to be clever for clever's sake. If you have a reason for doing something, do it. Do not just try to show that you're smart. Like, everyone here is smart. It's okay. You don't have to show you're smart. You have to show that you have a point. And, like, this is one of these things that annoys me in philosophy. So it's like, you don't have to, like, show off. Like, there's no need. I don't give a fuck if you're showing off. Like, show that you have something worth saying or listening to. Okay. And this is me being annoyed with this author right here. Like, why did they do that? And fuck it up. Okay. If this conceptual logical analysis and entailment is correct, it could be, but not the way they put it, then those concerned with moral conundrums posed by autonomous robots are under no special argumentative burden to explain why the existence of gaps is problematic. An ontological acknowledgement of responsibility gaps is by that very fact an acknowledgement of their problematic nature. Yeah, so this is fine. You're saying, look, if you say there is a responsibility and there's a gap, that makes no sense. The whole point is that there should be human responsibility there. Frank says show off by being correct. Well, you have to, that's the minimum. You're not showing off. They were trying to do things in a fancy way, but they got the fancy way wrong. The minimum is at least to get the stuff right. There's no point in being doing it. Yeah. It's like if you're wrong, then it's not showing off. All right. While an outright denial of responsibility gaps, like the stance taken by Teagard, would be logically consistent, the mixed stance taken by Koenigs is not. This, at any rate, is the gist of my concern with his compromise. Let me now go over my core argument more slowly by unpacking the key terms responsibility gap and problem in that order. Yeah, Frank, you are correct. The minimum is quite hard. The minimum standards in philosophy are extremely difficult. Philosophy is just generally difficult overall, and I'm not saying anything else is easy. Like if you're going to do history, sociology, any social science, everything is extremely difficult, but people think, oh, you're just talking in philosophy. No. Like this person knows their logic, I'm sure, and both the editor and this person fucked up their logic. Like this is, I know what they meant to say, but this is formally incorrect. And so like when I was giving my talk a week and a half ago, someone asked me like, oh, is this like formally correct? I'm like, yeah, that is. And they're like, are you sure? And then like I went up and I was like, no, I went in and put in like 1,000,000 parentheses to show that it was formally correct. They're like, is that well formed? I'm like, oh yeah, it is. And because the way it was formed, then he had a problem. Because the way people normally drop parentheses, like should have, like they get lazy about it, it would have looked less bad under the drop with the normal way people write it. But because of the way I wrote it with full parentheses, because I was being careful, there was actually a criticism that he generated. Now, I think the criticism was wrong, but it was a very sophisticated question. So it's like, yeah, like getting the logic right is not easy, and that's the minimum if you're going to write it down. It has to be well-formed, and that's like a technical sentence. It has to be a well-formed formula, WFF. So it's like if you were to write a program and it doesn't compile or it doesn't have an output, and you were like trying to submit it as like evidence, it's like your program doesn't run. You have to have the logic run. This has to be computer recognizable. Okay, what responsibility means. The word responsibility figures in our evaluative lexicon if anything does. Responsibility allows us, among other things, to track who did what and had a capacity to do otherwise. Insofar as this tracking enables judgment and judgment serves a vital welfare-promoting function, responsibility is a good. Bad events will invariably happen, but we try to reduce bad events stemming from human sources by justly directing blame, liability, punishments, and so on. What is a good in this paper? Okay, so what they're saying, what they're calling good here, Dojo, is a human good. We like the notion of responsibility because it allows us to shape and direct human activities in a way that makes sense to us. So like we have cultural institutions like, like the law and government, and like, but not even that. Like you can have like social ways, like you can be unhappy with somebody and tell them so, and you can sanction them in, like, you don't need the government. You can do that in like your social like circle to get people to act a certain way. Say, don't hit, like you can tell a kid, do not hit your sister, you're going to detention, or you're going to, like, you send someone to their room. So having responsibility, saying like, okay, that kid is responsible for their actions, allows us to shape their behaviors via, rewards and punishments. So not a goods and services, but a good versus bad. Yeah, this is a moral and social good in the sense that we can use people's, like, the notion of responsibility to direct their behavior. Like, you are responsible for your actions, and if you break the rules, there will be social sanctions that go against you. And in that sense, it is something useful in our society. Okay. Like the law of supply and demand, when you dim the negative consequences of causing harm, you increase the likelihood that harm will be caused. Yeah, so like I was just saying. So, like, by socially sanctioning certain acts and unsanctioning other acts, you can, like, forbidding other acts, you can get people to act in a way that we want. This insight about the practical benefits of moral responsibility is as old as Plato's rings of Gyges fable. The ring of Gyges is a ring that lets you be invisible. And so Plato said, well, if you had a ring of invisibility, would you do bad stuff because you could get away with it? And so it shows that the social sanctions that people seeing you do stuff is an effective way of controlling behavior. The problem, however, is that our usual ethical resources fail to move or affect autonomous robots which decide to play hardball. Without a hint of mental or physical pain in the mix, there's no real way to deter such a robot from acting badly. Why should they care that others care? In this respect, autonomous social robots resemble sociopaths. They might act well some or most of the time, but given that they do not really care about our usual responsibility practices, our good fortune is at the mercy of their whim. Frank says, how bad of stuff? Of course I wouldn't do slightly bad stuff as judged by others. Yeah. So this is always a question of morality. Where does it exist? Are you just afraid because you're going to get punished either by your social circle or by, like, bad God coming down, like sending you to hell when you die, like religious stuff? Or are you not a terrible person and just wouldn't do that either because you would feel bad, or you would never do it because, well, you aren't the sort of person who would even think to do anything bad? Frank says, being invisible at all is bad to some people, I bet. Yeah. I mean, it's easy enough to imagine, like, people would spy on other people, like, that they see things that they, other people want to keep private. Of course, like, you could go steal stuff a lot easier. Like, you just could go take what other people have. So, like, yeah. I mean, we make it very easy to be invisible nowadays with our technology. So people will go steal your money by, hacking into a computer system, and that keeps them removed. So, like, there are all sorts of ways that these things still exist right now. Yeah. Okay, so having sociopaths in our midst is the price we pay for allowing the lottery of births to play itself out. Yeah, so there are sociopaths already. That's fair. Autonomous robots, by contrast, are fully avoidable. We spent almost all of human history without them. So when harms are caused by such machines, we might be tempted to blame those who built them. This is an interesting claim. We have spent almost all of human history without autonomous robots, yes. But we have not spent all of human history without technology, and we have used our technology in terrible ways. So again, you could, like, start blaming the weapons for killing people. It wasn't me, it was the arrow that killed you. We've had arrows for most of the course of, like, human history. So it's like, well, do we actually blame the arrow, or do we blame the archer? I don't know. Yeah, oh, good point, Vipers. Vipers also says robot also is like slaves. So are we responsible for the activity of our slaves? And so, like, yeah, people have also tried to get out of stuff then. Yeah. Frank says, actually, I said, of course, but really wouldn't have any use for the ring of invisibility. It's not hard to think of, like, you know, if you don't, a lot of people would. A lot of stuff, like someone was saying, what would you do with portals a while back on stream? It's like, well, if you could like have like instantly transport places, you could transport into like, you know, a movie star's house and see them undress or whatever. So it's like all sorts of like weird things you could do, like that you might want to see. Viper says the word robot comes from the Czech word robota, which means forced labor. The word robota comes from the Slavic root rob, which means slave. So there we go. Yeah. So that's good point. Little history lesson, and linguistics goes into this. Philology shows that even our concepts are tied together in this way already. Frank says, oh, you'd have tons of use for teleportation. But yeah, that's the point, is that the technology actually, and as Vipers is pointing out, has like the abuse of technology goes back forever. And so just this new iteration makes it more clear. But like, I don't know if we can avoid technology or the abuse of technology. So it's like right here, I think a little bit of this is a little bit too fast what they said here, but still the point is that the contemporary tech is new. Yeah. Okay, so when harms are caused by such machines, such machines, it could be called such technology, and then that would harken back to ancient times when we had just different technology, but we still had tech. We might be tempted to blame those who built them. The problem is that owing to machine learning, the rules by which such machines act are not fixed during the production process, but can be changed during the operation of the machine by the machine itself. This leaves us in a bind. We cannot blame a robot because it cannot really care, but neither can we blame the programmers because they had no say in the robot's particular decisions. Okay, they're just setting up the problem here. Oh, what's the link there, Vipers? What do we got? No, pause. Dagnabbit. See what we got.
So is it any wonder people are afraid of technology? Technology!
Thank you, Vipers. That was very informative. Thank you. But yeah. So the idea is here, because we sort of let them go on their own, and then they change their own behaviors after we let them go. The engineers be like, we didn't know that was going to happen, but that also means that we knew that we were going to do that. So yeah. All right. So this is cause for concern. We carefully praise and blame in the hope that people will make good choices and reason will prevail. It is hard to see how one could both, one, acknowledge that a new class of agents is unaffected by these usual incentives and constraints, and that, two, all of this is unproblematic. If the ability to assign responsibility is good, as I am sure Koenigs would grant, then the inability to assign responsibility is bad. Yeah, you have to assume that responsibility exists in the way that these people have set up. Do we actually think this is how people are responsible? That's a wider question, and it does get discussed in like certain areas of philosophy, like what exactly is responsibility. That's an ontology question. Metaphysics, like metaethics, what is the responsibility? For the course of this paper, we are assuming that it is a good, because that is how we assign like either praise or blame. Okay. That's just an aside. Despite this, the degree in which our society depends on the use of autonomous robots is increasing fast, and it seems unlikely that we will be able or willing to abstain from their use in the future. Yeah, that's fair. Like, we're going to continue to this way. I mean, it's really funny to see, and I know we've got people here from Globus, the hand-wringing over DeepSeek coming out of China, and people like, oh, you can't use it, it's Chinese tech. It's like, do you trust ChatGPT? Do you trust the stuff coming out of the US? Do you trust stuff coming out of China? Well, it's like trust but verify. How does that happen? And like, how much do you really want to give to the LLMs? Viper says, should parents be responsible for their children's actions since they provide them with the moral programming? Yeah. And there have been cases here in the U.S. recently where parents were held responsible for, they bought the kid a gun. The kid was like clearly very happy about using it on other people, and the parents should have known. And I think that one of the parents of a shooting perpetrator got convicted of it. So it's like, we do. But it's hard to say, because at some point you have to say, no, the person is responsible. So it's like there's a line to be drawn, but where? Who knows? Okay, in this rush to build robots made in our image, we will only get halfway and thus end with machines that make their own decisions, yet experience neither pleasure nor pain. The combination that motivates the philosophical literature is thus essentially this: autonomous plus unfeeling equals responsibility gap. While Matthias did not feel any need to stress the point at the time, Koenig's compromise now requires us to go one step further and openly state the analytic truth that everyone else grasped implicitly. Responsibility plus gap is a problem. Yeah, so if it's autonomous and unfeeling, that makes a gap, and the gap, if you're giving it responsibility, that is a problem. Because how do we actually let something do whatever it wants and not assign responsibility to it? Like, what should we just keep letting it happen? Okay. Author recalls being patently indifferent when I was told that there are 8 planets in our solar system as opposed to 9. My indifference was fully compatible with my grasp of the concepts of 8, 9, and planet. Such indifference could not apply, however, if I were told that there's one more sociopath in my neighborhood. It is not just a personal dislike of sociopaths that is involved. The issue is semantic cum logical. If one grasps what the concept describes and one grants that something satisfies the description, it has to be a problem. We have normative vocabulary precisely so that affirming normative propositions has practical weight. Hence, to countenance gaps in responsibility at a purely descriptive level is to confess that one would rather not confront them at a normative level. That's a good question, Caudillo. I take it you're asking because we have a different notion of good. Like, is it a good like responsibility is good here? You might just be asking the like descriptive question if it is like a good game. I think people like the Civilization games in general. So the idea that it's continuing is actually a good, because it increases the it's something people like to enjoy, and I like the idea of people having fun. So I would actually consider it a social good besides being a good game too. Yes, so I think it is a good. Okay, what gap metaphorically means. The word gap typically indicates a spatial emptiness or void. See, I don't like this. Everyone fucking knows what gap means. He doesn't need to go over this stuff. He's trying to do it again, like above, to be a little bit impressive. Like, oh, I'm, arguing from definitions. I don't love this. What if the game is bad? Is it still a good? So you can still have are bad movies still, like, even if bad movies are being produced, like, and it's supporting the industry, and in that sense, like, it's still maintaining, like, it couldn't be that bad. Hey, what's up, Faraday? Like, if a game is like really terrible and ruins like the Civilization name, I think then it would be a bad. But like, does every game in that series have to be a complete banger? No. So it depends on how bad. Yeah, Faraday, that's analytic philosophy for me. No, Faraday, this is just bad philosophy in general. Being pedantic for pedantic's sake, you have that problem too. Just making dumb definitions for no good reason, you have that too. It's just bad philosophy. But how you doing, Faraday? If anyone doesn't know Faraday, Faraday's one of those dirty continentals that we love. And he's working on the philosophy of charisma, actually. What is it to be a charismatic leader? Yeah. Yeah, over-defining is the hallmark. Yeah. I mean, is it so bad it's good? Well, that's actually, Nibiru, like, you can talk about movies that are camp. So there's movies that you can say are, like, they were aiming for one thing, and then they turned out to be something, they were so bad at that they sort of came all the way around. And it turns into, like, a cult classic or a camp movie. And so, like, it depends on what you're, like, if you're saying it was, like, a bad horror movie, but it was, like, a good comedy movie because it was unintentionally so funny, then it's like, yeah, it was such a bad horror movie that it became a good comedy movie. It's like, yeah, you have to have different notions of good and bad operating at any one time, but like that can happen. So yeah, you're on lunch break again. Cool, I appreciate you stopping by. So I mean, we're talking about robots and robot responsibility. Like, is it possible that we can say the robot makes decisions but is not responsible for them? And so that's why, like, the responsibility gap is what we're saying here. There's no need for this fucking extra, just like definition-y sort of thing. But, you know, this is like, as Barudu kind of is alluding to, it's like the hallmark of analytic philosophy, over defining things just because that's what analytic philosophers do. So, you know, but as I've said before, and this was a continental philosopher who said it, pretentiousness is a philosophy job hazard. If you're going to be a philosopher, if you are a philosopher, you have to accept a level of pretentiousness that just comes with the business. And it's like, that's what you get. It's just a job hazard. It's a normal part of the business, and you accept it and move on. So, and it's true. Going to be pretentious sometimes, even if you don't mean to be. Okay, the word gap typically indicates a spatial emptiness or void. You don't fucking say. So when used in an ethical context, it must be a stylistic flourish. No fucking shit. It's a metaphor. Just define what you mean, dickhead. Sorry, now I'm angry. In the context that interests us, it signals a negation or privation of some sort. Hence, to say there's a responsibility gap just is to say there is no responsibility or responsibility of a responsible party. Okay. Doggio says the very last sentence of Koenig's paper is, quote, when autonomous systems are involved, achieving responsibility justice may be particularly difficult. Ugh, that's annoying. Like, that's an annoying. It's like, oh, maybe this is hard. Yeah. Barity says, if 10-year-old children know what a word means, I shouldn't have to define it. Exactly. This is just like there's no need for this paragraph. Words can be combined in more ways than concept can. But it is the underlying concepts, not the words, which determine whether a stance is feasible. My central point can thus be arrived at from another angle. Anyone out there reading these two paragraphs? If your central point can thus be arrived at from another angle, just fucking do it then. Don't waste my time with this shit. Point about writing stuff. If it can be done in a way of not just like bullshitting, drop the bullshit and just do it. Okay. So hopefully it'll get better. Like, these short paragraphs are crappy, but it's short. You're so aligned with my anger response. Yeah. Well, this is the problem. Wait, go back. What's the gap? Fuck you, Ra. Viper says, I'm ready to make Canada the 51st state. No, I am entirely on Canada's side on this one. Yeah. We can all agree that had Matthias fancied different words, he could have just as easily called it a responsibility problem. Yeah. Indeed, the sentence immediately following his introduction of the expression responsibility gap describes it as a problem. You see, exactly. Motherfucking author, you didn't need to make any fucking, you didn't have to waste any time on gap. You could have just said gap or problem, as the guy said on this page. That would have taken no time and everyone would have understood immediately. Douglas says, Koenig's acknowledged that there is a problem. The problem is rare because in most cases, those individuals who built and deployed the systems are responsible. Yeah, so there's a little bit of bullshit going on here. But in this author's defense, if Koenig spent the entire paper defending it and then walked it back, that's on Koenig. And I'm not angry with this author calling Koenig's out for it. Like, that, this author is still right. Koenig's should have had a better position not to have walked back their main thesis. And if this person's calling them out, I'm okay with Champagne on the overarching issue with Koenig's then. So had Matthias opted for the label responsibility problem, Koenigs would not be able to acknowledge its existence while denying that it is a problem. No, that's not true. So this is like they're getting hung up. Just because someone calls it a problem, you could have called it a non-problem and said that's just what they called it, but they're wrong. So they could have like denied that their usage of the word problem is actually a legitimate use of the word problem. Philosophers can do this all day. They can just deny that your usage was the correct usage and then change what you meant. So the idea that like the way it was phrased initially actually would have saved them is wrong. So this is just wrong again on Champagne's part. Remember, I have a new command at my disposal. Vipers, you did ask it to be used for you and you alone. So I am, although I can use it, it is actually, I am respecting your wishes at the moment, and it is a Vipers only thing. I don't need a video to call something bullshit. I can just do it in my own voice. Although you're right, the video is it's nice. It's cool. Oh, well, I appreciate that. What Vipers is talking about is we now have
everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you.
I really hope that doesn't get my videos muted on YouTube. I am a little bit worried about that, but usually short clips like that with no music are okay. That suit is fantastic. Yeah. It all costs money. You said you haven't seen that movie. There's a reason why he's wearing that suit in particular, and I won't spoil it. You should go watch My Cousin Vinny. It is actually a fantastic movie. What's with the suit? Barude, you should go watch My Cousin Vinny. There is a backstory to that suit. Like, you should go watch that movie. If you don't know My Cousin Vinny, it is really an excellent movie. And one of the fun parts about the history of the movie is it actually gets the courtroom scenes kind of accurate. So, like, it apparently gets used to demonstrate things like when educating people into, like, the legal profession here in the U.S. because it's got accurate court interplay here in court stuff. Oscar, yeah, it's a good movie. Like, it's straight up good. So I'm just very annoyed with Champagne and like the pseudo-analytic philosophy here. Okay, the contradiction at hand would be too overt. Yeah, well, you don't know some of the people I know. They don't give a fuck about contradictions. I fail to see how Matthias' superficial word choice generates a conceptual possibility that Koenigs wishes to occupy. Again, philosophers are very clever. If they want to find new logical space to like, go exist in, they will do it. You don't need like words to make this space. They'll just make it up. Okay. So, Champagne continues. In this regard, Matthias coining may be a victim of its own viral success, since you never want your label to be so catchy that it obscures the substance of what is involved. Yeah, this is all just garbage argumentation, my opinion, but whatever. Okay, how problematic must a problem be? Reconstructing Koenig's reasons, it may be that he deems the responsibility gap unproblematic because he introduces stipulations that make the situation rarer and more manageable. As he sees it, if negligent, reckless, or malicious behavior led to an autonomous system causing harm, whoever engaged in this behavior, the manufacturer, the programmer, the operator, etc., clearly is blameworthy. Okay, yeah, so they are blaming the engineers. And author Champagne says, superficially, this seems right. Yet when we examine the situation more carefully, we find this stance deploys the concept of autonomy without fully considering how it changes things. Excuse me. Koenigs mentions a highly autonomous vehicle and says the fact that the vehicle acts autonomously and unpredictably does not mean that the engineer is not responsible. He thus wants engineers to do more to foresee and limit the risk of harm. This harm prevention intent is laudable, but how could anyone possibly meet Koenig's request given the autonomy at hand? By definition, one cannot foresee and limit what autonomous agents do. The relationship that police and parents have with adult children would be very different if it were otherwise. Yeah, and so this is, we were bringing this up before. At what age does the parent stop being responsible for the actions of their kid? Or ever, or whatever. But like, yes, we somehow think that in the US, when you are above the age of 18, your parents stop somehow being as responsible for you legally. We thus need to be clear about the type of robot considered. Is the vehicle discussed by Koenig's highly autonomous or truly autonomous? If a manufacturer can be proven to have had some input in a robot's particular deed, then that robot was not truly autonomous. We remain free to use the word autonomy in a loose manner, but it is only autonomy in its strict free will-like version that generates responsibility gaps. Yeah, and so anyone coming in still here from Globus, it's like, at what point are we saying the artificial intelligence is truly autonomous, is truly separate from everything else? It's like, how do you do that? Because people also, we draw from sources. How much are we ripping off from the history? Like, we consume history and consume art and consume data. How much are we ripping off from them versus an LLM doing the same thing? Ugh. Voice is going, sorry. But we're almost done. When a robot is autonomous, its specific actions are causally uncoupled from that robot's point of origin. Yeah, so now we're finally getting somewhere. We're saying it's causally separate or causally distinct from the history that came before it. Humans witnessing autonomous robotic decisions are not connected to those decisions in a way that satisfies... Thank you, Ribbons, for the follow. What Tadeo and Blanchard call the causality condition, which says that in order for an agent to deserve blame, there has to be a causal connection between the decision or action of the agent and their effects. Even a company run by saints would have no say in what an autonomous robot does once it is released in the wild. To dramatize this point, if an autonomous robot spontaneously murdered innocent people, it would make no difference whether it was built by Boston Dynamics, the Taliban, or Disney. So while I agree with Deborah Johnson that there are good reasons for staying with human responsibility, it cannot solve all our problems to put pressure on developers to ensure the safety and reliability of such devices when the device in question is autonomous. We thus need a better fix than blaming the nearest bad actor. Yeah, so I agree with this, that just as we draw a limit with parents and kids, when does the kid start being responsible for themselves and it's not the parent's fault? When does the robot stop being the fault of the engineer and is somehow its own responsibility? And I guess there's a problem though, because robots, do they continue to learn? Yeah. Could like a robot all be good and then have one of them somehow go off and be evil? That would be weird because there would be a case that all the robots could then go off and be evil. Should we destroy all the ones that have the possibility of evil? What's up, Dame Karen? Hard disagree, Dame Karen. Says robots are programmed, they're not spontaneous. Yeah, so this is the question. If they are programmed and not spontaneous, but they are somehow getting feedback all the time, and so they're changed from what their initial programming was, at what point do we say, well, the initial programmers could not have foreseen the outcome? Because the feedback loop has gone on for so long that it would have been inconceivable to understand where the robots have gotten themselves to. So, yeah. Koenig stipulates that the responsibility gaps can plausibly arise only in situations in which the negative outcome is not due to carelessness or malpractice. See, that's interesting. Because we already know we're careless in what we're doing with our AIs. We really don't know what they're going to do. So in some sense, we have no idea the level of risk that's involved here. And so the idea that we have to limit it to carelessness, well, we are being reckless. We just are. We know that, but we sort of like, it seems okay for the benefits that they give, or we're just biting that bullet. Yeah. All right, Champagne continues, but this stipulation fails to consider that due to talk is inapplicable to agents capable of making their own moral laws. I don't know what this means. Like, do robots make their own moral laws, or they just make decisions? What do you mean moral laws here, author? Like, how did we get from making decisions to moral laws? Dame Karen says, when they are self-aware and independent, I can't see humans letting that happen. Yeah. But the author is arguing against here, where it's sort of like it's beyond anything we could have foreseen that it's making decisions now. And then where's the responsibility then? It all comes to asking AI how much AI should be able to stop AI, should be able to AI so that we can know that AI can AI more like AI. Yes, that's part of the issue. But again, does responsibility ever get into that little loop of the AI AIing at that point? Once we reach a certain level of sophistication, the folks in charge are no longer in charge. What we can do, however, is refrain from releasing autonomous robots in the first place or demand moral answerability of the humans who release them. Yeah, so the people who let them out without actually telling us how dangerous they are, even if they don't know or only can guess. Importantly, whatever pressure we exert must be applied beforehand, since once released, programmers and developers can justifiably exonerate themselves by citing the lack of any causal link. Companies will thus prioritize safety over or severely limit AI use only if they publicly accept real consequences for whatever negative outcomes ensue. And anyone in the computer or tech space knows that this will never happen. They release it and they say, use at your own risk, without telling you what those risks are. I mean, that is standard practice in basically all software that you're not paying for. If you pay for, then you have like a certain like level of, they may keep some responsibility, but all open source software says, use at your own risk, have at it. Dame Karen says, here's the problem. Also, AI companies are not trying to make moral beings, they're trying to make a profit. Yeah, exactly. So they won't want to do this because it will be unprofitable. And that's exactly what you're saying. So the suggestion here is that we have to hold them responsible, and they'll just say, well, we can't make money, and they'll shut down. And so then they'll just fight back, and they'll say, well, then you can't have all the AI, and the US government will be like, haha, we want AI because we want someone else having AI, and then we'll just get it forced down our throats. Anyway, continuing, let's finish this up. This should be over, okay, in a few pages still. We humans can build machines whose artificial intelligence leaves us no say in their particular decisions. As puzzled as we may be by this problem of our own making, it remains a problem. I mean, as we were saying before, we make kids make decisions that we can't control. We've always had this problem. Champagne has been emphasizing how Koenig does not regard it as problematic, but what generates an untenable tension is his recognition that the responsibility gap exists. Surely we can grant that such a gap, however rare, leaves our ordinary blaming and holding responsible practices unfulfilled or in need of revision. We might be able to, as Champagne and Tompkins, Keener, Gunkel, Gagosian, and Sovic suggest from different angles, to reshape and redirect those blaming and holding responsible practices to meet a surprising new issue. Fashions to the side, humans do not rework their mores and norms unless they are given a real cause to do so. Hence, the mere fact that we now feel a need to think or act differently as a result of autonomous robots attests to the gap being problematic to some degree. And this is a fair point. All the bullshit aside from above, that we are now discussing this a lot, does give sociological evidence that this is a real problem. Like, we do feel the need to be able to control autonomous robots or AI, or fully blame the engineers. Otherwise, we're just going to let this spin out of control. Champagne says we have to redirect our blame, or at least justify why we don't redirect it. Koenigs may not lose sleep over the redirection option, but justifying why the moral practices already in place suffice did merit a considerable slice of his philosophical attention. Hence, at minimum, the responsibility gap qualifies as a problem in the same way that, say, the mind-body problem in philosophy of mind is a problem. Yeah. We were trying to explain what to do, we have to explain exactly what's going on, and we don't even have the exact understanding of what's going on. And it's like, if we could completely understand what was going on in the AIs, then it wouldn't be a problem. Like, we could point to what was going wrong, but we can't do that. Okay, no problem, no tangible recommendation either. Unlike the mind-body problem, problems about responsibility have real-life urgency. When an autonomous robot misbehaves, people get hurt. Koenig remarks that the intuitively most compelling concern about responsibility gaps revolves around their possible harmful consequences. Robots are human-made artifacts, so unlike natural events like hurricanes, someone needs to be held responsible for the hurt generated. Well, no, not always. We chalk a lot of stuff up to society, and somehow that is okay, but that gets into like other sorts of things. Like if Barry Day is still here, there's a lot of talk, at least in I don't know if Barraday or some of our social and political philosophers, society allows certain people to get abused, hurt, because it just doesn't matter. And so it's like the idea that like, someone needs to be held responsible for people who are hurt or generated. A lot of people are not held responsible for those who are hurt, just in society. Dame Karen says one could argue many humans are responsible for hurricanes. Also, certainly the increase in their frequency. Yeah, so if we then chalk up climate change to like the industrialized countries, then yeah, maybe the United States does have responsibility. And as a citizen of this great nation of the United States of America, I should be doing something about this. And that's fair. But yeah, the point here is just that we should be doing stuff about things that we can change, even though quite often we let it go. Yeah, Cowdio's just like, I'm just happy to be here. It's like, I'm just here so I don't get fined. I'm just here so I don't get fined. Usually, when we judge a person to be responsible for an action, one of the things that we mean is that the person is rightly subject to a range of specific reactive attitudes like resentment, gratitude, censure, or praise. The question is how to justly pinpoint the culpable party. What makes this question tricky is that the robot which caused the calamities exhibits autonomy. Matthias was the first to remark that as a result of this autonomy, the manufacturer or operator of the machine is in principle not capable of predicting future machine behavior. Viper says ultimately will all come down to the cost-benefit ratio. When cars first introduced accidents were common due to lack of infrastructure, regulations, and experience. When they were first introduced, there was accidents because of lack of infrastructure, regulations, and experience. There was public outrage, but we realized that these car things are quite useful, leading today to what we consider where we don't even consider the 40,000 fatalities a year in the U.S. alone because cars have just have too much utility. Yes. What do you want me to argue for at all cost money? For autonomous AI? Well, I mean, clearly it's a good that's coming in the future. The only real question is it going to like us? As long as we have ethical AI that acts in a good way, how would we be in any position to say that it's a bad thing? Especially if it is a moral AI. Like that seems like a no-brainer because that would give us a new perspective on the world and one that could be incredibly helpful in solving the problems that we have as a species right now. So fully autonomous AI, especially in the ethical sense, if the alignment problem is solved, we're good to go. Now, if it is fully autonomous and evil, well, clearly we don't want evil, but that's not what you said. A fully autonomous AI that we actually can get along with is probably one of the things that would be most beneficial to our society right now. So yeah, and to what I was saying, and Viper has brought up, so many people die from auto accidents, but we just seem to think that's fine. For a long time, when cell phones were introduced, they thought they would try to ban people from being on their phones in the car. And there are still laws against that, but that basically is getting ignored by everyone as far as I can tell. So it's like cell phones in cars make them incredibly more driving incredibly more dangerous, but it's just a level of danger we're accepting. Dame, was that okay at all cost money? Dame says, honestly, if they are based on logic, they'll come to the same conclusion that Ultron did. Humans are the worst thing for the planet. Depends on what their goals are. I mean, depends on their logic. That logic is very, very permissible, actually. Like, it really doesn't lead to, any firm conclusions on its own. So, logic is not so easy to assume that, this is how it's going to come out. Prions. Prions are the worst. Yes, Dojo says. Humans are second worst. That's fair. Dame says we are the worst thing for Earth, though, and we have done so much damage in the short time we've been here. Yeah. Well, according to what? The Earth is going to be fine in the long run. We're going to die. The Earth will be fine in a few 100,000 years or however long it takes. So this is the old line from the comedian Rufus from Bill and Ted's. I start losing names, but the Earth is going to be fine. It will just take a few 100,000 years, but the Earth will be around for a few 100,000 years. Like, I don't think it's going to be bad for us and the current species that are alive here, but the Earth will be fine, and there will be, as long as we don't wipe out all life on Earth, there will be life going forward. Yeah, so. Yeah, but we're pretty shitty at the moment, but that doesn't mean we're the worst thing ever, no. Prions make cows mad? Accurate. Yeah, so it all costs money. Yeah, there are other things that are bad. They'll see us as the soil from which they grow. Possibly, too. That doesn't mean we should be kept around, though. Like, people can, get rid of their maker. Steve the John, what's up? When people say the Earth, they really mean the biosphere, and that's what humans should care about. We are stewards of the Earth, and we are causing a mass extinction event. We should be stewards of the Earth. Yes, but again, in a long enough time frame, as long as we really don't wipe out all life on Earth, it'll come back. Like, it took a few billion years for this. Earth got another few billion years in it. Yeah. So, yeah, but yeah, as people are making in chat, we should be doing a better job of what's alive right now. And I think that's fair. Yeah, the planet will be here long after we're gone, so... No, it doesn't make... Stevie John asks, does that make me feel good about it? No, but it just makes it clear that we're fucking ourselves and everything on Earth right now over. We're not destroying the Earth, we're destroying ourselves. We should at least be clear about what we're doing. We are being complete assholes to ourselves and current life. We do need to do better. Like, if we don't want to live in a shithole, then we need to do better. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your agreement. It all costs money. Okay, where were we? Continuing. If holding humans responsible has good consequence like deterrence, and robotic autonomy prevents us from holding humans responsible, then robotic autonomy robs us of those good consequences. Koenig thus grasps the common worry that if nobody is responsible, people are under no pressure to minimize harm and damage, which in turn erodes a socially beneficial incentive structure. Yes. This is what we were talking about earlier in what is a good in this case. It's a socially beneficial incentive structure. How do we get people to act in a culturally and socially useful way when they may not be inclined to do so? Okay. Now, according to Koenigs, that an autonomous system's high degree of autonomy exculpates negligent, reckless, or malicious behavior on the part of the manufacturer, programmer, or operator is precisely what is so implausible to assume. Author finds it inappropriate to label this an assumption, let alone an implausible one, since it received an extensive defense. Matthias' original discussion of artificial intelligent neural nets went to great lengths to demonstrate how and why it is impossible to link the decisions of an autonomous robot to the decisions of a human. In his influential piece, Matthias gives the real, not made-up example of an adaptive elevator system which uses AI to minimize how long users wait before getting a car. Although it might be possible to prove mathematically that eventually the used algorithm will converge to some optimal behavior, the AI component means that it is no longer possible for the manufacturer to predict or control the specific behavior of the elevator in a given situation. At all costs money says exculpates, show or declare that someone is not guilty of wrongdoing. Yep. It is beyond dispute that robots endowed with AI behave in ways that allow us to discern attractors. The AI elevator will tend to yield short wait times, just as the AI soldier will tend to pick correct targets. However, to paraphrase what Leibniz said with regards to free will, such attractors incline without necessitating. The observable patterns of behavior exhibited by an autonomous robot are the result of training instead of direct programming, so this machine learning leaves room for spontaneous actions completely at odds with what we expect or intend the robot to do. Hey, what's up, Atom Fighter? One recent discovery that has been counterintuitive is that larger neural nets aggravate, not alleviate, this possibility of unpredictable misalignments with human values and expectations. So if we value control, we should be making our machines dumber, not smarter. Well, dumber in the sense that they have less feedback that has less to do with us. I mean, a very highly sophisticated logic is fully under our control, but it doesn't have this sort of feedback loop in it. I am out of water, Atom Fighter, so I can't drink. My voice is rough, I know. I am sorry, but I'd like to get through this. Dojo says, I think that neither this author nor Koenigs have very much imagination regarding AI. AI can have constraints. Certainly the elevator AI won't be allowed to minimize wait times by increasing the speed of the elevator, injuring occupants. Yes. So that's a good point. Like, we're not worried about chess AIs doing any damage in the, like, outside of chess. But, self-driving cars, however, yeah, because it's dealing with novel situations. Both the elevator and the chess bot, they have a restricted number of moves. The self-driving car has an infinite number of moves because it's in the real world, not in a closed system. Dame Karen says, if we make them dumber, is their point? I mean, they're good for manual labor. Yeah, exactly. No one wants to do that either. It's like, okay, we can only make an AI that we can fully control. Well, that's not going to be a very good AI compared to even the AIs we have now. Doger says, Koenigs lacks the imagination to know that unconstrained AI and be harmful in a way that wouldn't be predicted by the engineers or implementers of said AI. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, that's definitely going into this, is that they haven't considered the tentacles that the AI can get its get itself into, how far it can reach its tentacles. Adam says, oh my god, how do they program self-driving cars if it has to choose between its occupants living or it fails? Yeah, to the people in the car, the ones it's going to hit. They don't tell you how it does this, but these things definitely are built into the programs. They are. They have to be. All right. When a robot is explicitly built to be artificially intelligent, its independent choices are not a bug, but a feature. It should not be tendentious then to admit that we always risk being surprised by what the robot does. This loss of control changes everything. What evidence do we normally have for calling a robot manufacturer negligent, reckless, or malicious? A robot's harm-causing malfunction, of course. But if no link can be established between that malfunction and what the manufacturer did or intended, those assessments of blameworthiness and pejorative labels become misplaced. Dojo asks, are they Japanese tentacles? Do the chickens have sharp talons? I mean, I guess it depends. Is it, a Japanese car manufacturer, or is it like a U.S.-based car manufacturer? I don't know. Adopting a stance similar to Koenig's compromise, Josef Demertas seeks to deflate ethicist worries with the following analogy. Quote, suppose instead of deploying AI, soldiers shoot an arrow into the war zone and victim dies as a result. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Excuse me. This analogy begs the question. Demertas talks of an AI that unexpectedly malfunctions, but the notion of an autonomy means that we must wrap our minds around the more challenging and arguably unprecedented idea that an AI can unexpectedly function. So if we truly wish to calibrate our intuitions, an analogy more apt than flying arrows, because that's just like you're doing it on purpose, but you're doing it with some randomness factored in. But you understand that the randomness is factored in when you shoot an arrow into the air. So if we wish to truly calibrate our intuitions, an analogy more apt than flying arrows would be the cartoon revolver from the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where the 6-cylinder chamber is loaded with little cowboy characters. Would we equip police officers with these sorts of guns, and if a bullet person spontaneously decides to head in a direction of its own choosing, as happens in the movie, would we be justified in holding the officer responsible? Upon witnessing the cowboy bullets take matters into their own hands, the movie's protagonist, Eddie Valiant, tosses the revolver to the curb. When it comes to AI, an argument may be made that we should do the same, especially since smart but non-autonomous robots will satisfy most needs. Dame says they might not teeth though. They might not teeth though. The chickens with teeth die, and Dame is like, oh yeah, we should have like cute little cartoon guns. Aha. Yeah, I mean, we should not be deploying. Yeah, it's like, well, this is the, weaponizing, like militarizing the AI. It feels like we don't want the Terminator situation where it just is making all sorts of decisions about what to kill and we don't really know what's going on. But again, it's like if it's on our side, it seems okay then, but still. Adam says, yeah, if you play with fireworks and my house gets burned, they have to compensate me. Yeah, exactly, Adam. Yeah. Well, you just don't want the thing like in Terminator deciding, no, humans are the problem, or the Matrix, or everything else. Okay. Where were we? Now, if Koenigs were to oppose the strong idea that these gaps in responsibility pose an insoluble problem, I would understand that and oppose it too. That is not, however, what he says. He claims that the responsibility gap is not a problem to core. What would someone who adopted this view think about, say, autonomous robots that go rogue in war? Demertis contends that a drone falsely identify a non-combatant as a threat and killing him is no different than any other unfortunate case where things just go wrong despite all precautionary measures. Though even if one disagrees, this isn't troubling for me. So when you have friendly fire, generally someone's held responsible, and even in that case, like, procedures have to be revised. If you just keep using the same drones over and over that kill your own people, then it would seem to be bad, I would say. Human U.S. soldiers do this. Yeah, exactly. So, but the point is that you can revise or retrain soldiers. If you don't revise or retrain your drones, then it's like, well, that is a problem. So if you can't fix the problem, then I'd still say there's an issue here. Like, it should still be troubling for you. You need a better drone at that point. Now, in war, there is acceptable loss. And so you may not be able to get that yet, but like, I don't see that as acceptable going forward. Yeah, no policy recommendation could be extracted from this sanguine indifference. Koenig says that the legal framework should piggyback on what is just. I agree. But if no special injustice occurred, then no special ethical or legal tools are required. One may thus regard the responsibility gap as not morally problematic in a way that counts against developing or using AI. Right now, some open letter signatories to the side, few think that AI is morally problematic in a way that counts against developing or using it. Although I will stay silent on whether continuing this status quo constitutes an improvement or a setback, the fact that Koenig's compromise blends well with present trends is worth bearing in mind. Yeah. Conclusion. Yeah, so the whole point is that it's like, if you can't do anything about it, it's like, well, you can just like let it go, but that's not a good answer indefinitely. All right, conclusion. The foregoing demonstration that Koenig's compromise is untenable employed an analysis of what constitutes what constituent concepts mean. Just as unmarried plus male gets you bachelor for free, responsibility plus gap gets you problem for free. It violates the meanings involved then to acknowledge that responsibility is lacking yet claim indifference. Yeah. Redundancy tends to threaten debate spaces that become crowded, so as was said, at the outset, participants would celebrate the addition of a new possibility. Although provocative suggestions can often be rejuvenative, they sometimes result in stances that cannot stand, just as developers venturing atop land reclamation risk being on unstable foundations. The contradiction involved in Koenig's compromise may not be as overt as a head-on P and not P clash, but it can nevertheless be revealed by attending more carefully to the concepts employed. Koenig is aware that his yes to existence and no to problem compromise is vulnerable on that front. He observes that were one to stress the analytic entailments I have stressed, the problematic nature of responsibility gaps would be built into the definition. For there to be a responsibility gap would mean for there to be a problematic absence of responsibility. In that case, he says his response would quite simply be that the responsibility gaps do not exist at all. Whatever its ultimate merit, such a move would at least betoken a return to solid ground. If my arguments can compel Koenig to switch from his compromise to an outright denial of the responsibility gap, I will consider that incremental progress. Okay, my voice is very happy. I'm done reading. But now what we do is we rate the paper. What did you think about this? If it gave you fun ideas that makes your brain dance, give it a brain dance. And yes, spelling and capitalization count here. Nog Scream for existential or artistic drama, Nog Ouroboros for deeper ancient ideas discussed, Nog Knife for slicing and dicing arguments, Nog Navel, navel gazing only for academics, Nog Turd, all style no substance, still poop underneath, and Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay from Twitch, and my vote meh. Everything in the green will make an overall score, will push the overall score up. Everything in the red will push the overall score down, and the vote meh actually makes it go towards the middle. It all cost money, gave it a knife and grapes. Dame Karen gave it a turd. I agree with all of the ratings so far. Like, this is not the best paper. Is it the worst? No. But, like, it had some good qualities, as all cost money. It had, like, a little bit of analytic flair to it, but I just don't think it did a good job. Matty UNLD, what's up, Nog Turd? Yeah. If you want to get it in there, the T has to be, I'll fix it though. It was meh. It was. The T has to be capitalized, but I'll fix it later if you don't do it. Matt thing. All cost money, I gave it the meh. Dojo gave it the navel gazing. Yeah, this was a little navel gazy. I don't think it was the worst navel gazy. I mean, could you say, look, if we make an AI and it isn't a moral thing, that's not the way we made it, but it is a full AI, well, there's nothing to be done at that point. Like, that is a position. Now, the question is it a good position? But they brought it up. So, yeah. It is a Matt paper, though. Yeah, I'm mostly agreeing. Thank you, Globus. Thank you, Matt, for fixing that. I appreciate it, because I don't have to go back and change it afterwards. What do I say? I'm mostly in agree with chat at the moment. I'm giving it a Nog Knife. Like, a Nog Knife seems like the right thing for this paper. AI is already being used for war crimes. Vipers gave it a nay, a dance, navel gazing, and a grapes. Yeah, because it does kind of walk back a lot of its claims. So I'm going to give it a turd, because that stuff in the middle where they were just giving definitions to make it look analytic, that annoyed the fuck out of me. So I'm going to give it a turd. I'm going to give it, should I give it 2 turds? No, I'm going to give it also a vote meh, because I feel like it's a really in the middle sort of thing. They didn't do the worst job explaining what was going on, trying to like talk about some of the ideas. Yeah, the poop knife. Thank you, Dame Karen. That's actually a pretty good combination of those two. So, like, but I don't think this was the worst either. Like, they didn't do, like, we weren't, like, shitting on all their arguments. I shit on some of their arguments. Their arguments were crappy sometimes. They had a few things to say. So I'm going to give it 2 mehs, actually. It was a very meh paper. How do you do? Vote meh. So I'm giving it a bunch of mehs. Thank you for the follow. Matt UNL. If you have a way you want me to say it, let me know. I'll just call you Matt otherwise. Oh, cause I get, how are we going to tell if AI is going to be good or bad, and why should we be concerned? But it was wordy and not very well argued. Yeah. And so this is why people are giving it the navel gazing too, because it kind of focused on this one other argument. And I understand that, but I thought like the way they talked about it wasn't so bad either. So, like, I understand the navel gazing, though. Doger says, Koenig has a few papers on this. The one that I quickly read doesn't address that at some point we may lose control of dangerous AI. Well, that's okay. I mean, Koenig's doesn't have to cover all things in all the papers. But yes, that is an important point, that we have to be at least somewhat prepared for things getting out of hand when we are setting up systems like this. We've had many technologies get out of hand and cause us problems in the past, and this technology is no different from any of those. As Vipers mentioned, when we introduced cars, a lot of people died in car accidents, the lack of safety, infrastructure, and training, and then we adapted to it. So it's like this is a normal... Well, not normal, but this is a regular process that happens with any new technology. So we need to... Now, people are, of course, very afraid that the super AI is going to come and kill us all. That hasn't happened yet with any technology. But we do have to at least, like any other new technology, be careful with it. Just like the cars killed a lot of people. All right, 60 seconds. If anyone else wants to get in, now's the time. And then we'll go raid someone. Thanks again to Globus for raid. It's very nice. I appreciate it. And for sticking around and raiding. So, thank you. But yeah. I mean, I always go back to the Goldfinger James Bond movie, where Goldfinger is going to kill a lot of people. And Bond is like, you don't worry about that. And he goes, American motorists kill that many every year. It's like, there is a lot of acceptable loss in our society, where we just allow certain people to die, certain kinds of deaths are just accepted. And that is problematic, but you see that happening constantly. And so we are probably going to accept a certain amount of breakage also in human life and natural environment with this. One thing that you might notice recently is that people aren't they're screaming about the amount of energy being used to run all these new AI systems. People were going batshit insane about Bitcoin using a lot of electricity. Why? Well, Google and Facebook and all the other big players they're making a lot of money off the LLMs. Microsoft, that's OpenAI, that's ChatGPT. So you don't hear the same but won't someone please think of all the power plants we're spinning up now. But you did hear about Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin doesn't have as good a marketing department as Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon does. Globus says electricity was murder. Electricians have a high rate of debt. Yeah, exactly. It's acceptable breakage in society. This is why we have OSHA laws here in the U.S., which looks like Trump is going to try to get rid of, because it was too bad and people died and regulations are written in blood. So I expect the same thing to happen here. Something bad's going to happen, and then we're going to have to, come back and do it. Okie dokie. Viper said, and when computers were introduced in mass, people used Excel, and yet we tolerate it. Good point. I use Excel at work all the fucking time.